right? That view that I dragged out, that generic view. It's perfectly fine for that reference view to be a generic view. And then the gravity one, similar kind of deal. If the gravity is not set, then we'll create it, and we'll return it. And creating a gravity thing is very simple. We just say on gravity equals UI gravity behavior alloc init. Okay, I'm going to do one other thing here too, is I'm going to say self.animator add behavior. Okay, so anytime someone asks me for the gravity thing, I'm going to add it to my animator. But this is only going to happen once, right, because it's my lazy instantiator. So that's good. That's exactly what I want. I could also in here set things like the gravity's magnitude, right? So I could say, you know, light gravity instead of 1.0, a little lighter or whatever. Okay? So now I have an animator. I have a gravity behavior. All I need to do now is add this drop view, okay, that I created to that. So I'm just going to say self.gravity add item, my drop view. Okay? So now that the instant I do that, it's going to start animating. So let's take a look at that. So you can see as I click, they immediately start animating. Okay? And sorry. And but they're falling off the bottom. Okay? So that's not so good. I want them to stop at the bottom. So to do that, I just need a collision behavior. Very easy. Just go up here. Property, strong, non-atomic, UI collision behavior, collider, I'm going to call it. And my collider, if my collider's not set, oops, then I'll set it. Turn the collider. I really should have a snippet for that kind of thing. I think Johan showed that in this Friday section. So that equals UI collision behavior, alloc init. And here I'm also going to set the bounds, oops, to yes. So I'm going to have this collider use the bounds of the reference view as its bounds. Okay, so it's a one-line thing to get that in there. But I could make, you know, a nice UI Bezier path, you know, like down on the bottom, whatever I wanted. But then it suits my purposes here just to use the whole translation thing. And I'm going to do the same thing here, self.animator add behavior, this collider, okay, so that it gets added to the animator. So again, I need to add any items that I want to be affected by the collider to the collider. And now it's going to, as soon as I do that, if something hit it, it would start colliding. All right, so let's take a look at that. Okay, so hopefully they drop. They bomb. Notice they have a little bounce to them, a little bounce in their step. Okay. Now notice that they tilt a little. Okay, why does that happen? Well, on the way down, okay, the two, they landed, one was bouncing and the next one hit it, and there was a little bit of real world bounce to it. Now, probably if we're building a Tetris game, we don't want them to rotate and get off center like that. So we would have to, A, not allow rotation probably, and B, we might want to grid them up. And I don't think we're going to get that in the demo, but maybe on Wednesday after we get to that, I'll post how you would actually do that. Okay, and all we're going to do is when they collide, we're going to have them line themselves up. Okay, so we'll do that later on Wednesday. Okay, notice that I have these two very related behaviors, gravity and collider. They really go together. Okay, so this is where I might want to create a custom UI behavior. So let's do that real quick. So I'm just going to go File, New File, okay, New Class, and this class is going to be a UI dynamic behavior, and I'm going to call it the drop it behavior. Okay, and that is going to be a new behavior I'm creating that's going to have the gravity and the collider, and eventually some more things, as child behaviors. Okay, so let's just hit next. It's where it wants to put it. This is all good. Here it is. Okay, here's my drop it behavior. And all I'm going to do in this drop it behavior is I'm going to define a couple of methods here. Add item, which allows you to add a UI dynamic item. Notice that I'm using this protocol syntax. And then I'm also going to let you remove an item. Okay, and that's all I'm going to implement in my drop it behavior, except for I'm going to override its init. Okay, So what am I going to do? Init's init, so instance type init. I'm going to do self equals super init, so that's UI dynamic behaviors init. Oops. All right. And then return self. And then in between here, all I'm going to do is add child behaviors for the gravity and the collider, which I'm actually going to copy and paste to save ourselves a lot of time. Here's a nice little lazy instantiation of these. And let's go grab the, oops, let's grab the outlets for these. Grab those. Oops, sorry, I keep clicking on the wrong button on the right. Okay, so this is @ interface, drop it behavior. Oops, paste, hello, paste. End, okay, so we got those, that's good. These lines, we're not going to add it to the animator because we're going to add this whole behavior to the animator, so we can get rid of those. And in add item, which we'll put right here, actually let's go ahead and copy and paste these two things that we want. Add item and remove item. Okay, all I need to do here is add them to each of my sub-behaviors. So I'll do add item to my gravity and add item to my collider. And I'll do the same thing for remove. Okay, except for we want this to be remove. Okay, so this is a common pattern here. You create basically a dynamic behavior that it has child behaviors, and in the add item, you might also have add items, you might have init with items, whatever. And then here we're going to add child behaviors, the gravity, and the collider. Okay? So we've created a new class here. It's a subclass of UI dynamic behavior. We can add items to it, just like we added items to our gravity and our collider. And its implementation is merely to have these little sub behaviors. Okay, very, very simple. And when we go back to our controller here, we need to, instead of having the individual ones, now we're just going to have a drop it, # import, drop it behavior. We're just going to have a drop it behavior. Okay, we'll put a little lazy instantiation for this one too. Oops. So there's alloc init. That's going to call that other init that we just did. We'll do self.animator add behavior, our drop it behavior. Right? And then we'll just return our drop it behavior like that. And now down here, we don't have to add these separately. We're just going to say drop it behavior, add item, like that. Okay, so everyone understand how we kind of grouped all that stuff over there? And we're going to add more things as this demo goes on to this kind of general drop it behavior. And we're going to add them over in that other class now. We're still going to add other behaviors that we add here that really aren't part of that other thing. But now we've at least collected that into a nice space over there. So hopefully that didn't break anything. Let's see. It didn't. Okay, it's all still working, which is awesome. So now what I want to do is, when I get a full row like that, I want it to blow up. Okay? And I'm going to do the blow up not using a dynamic animator. Okay? I'm going to do that with that UI view animation business, because I want to show you how you can mix the two together, and they'll work fine. Okay, so let's do that. So how are we going to do that? Well, one question is, when can I start thinking about doing other animation when I've got this dynamic animator going off and doing all these things, bouncing and colliding and all that stuff? And the answer is, you can find out when an animator reaches quiescent state, when nothing's bouncing, everything is resolved, okay, when it's quiet. Okay? And you do that using a delegate for the animator. So if I go to Animator here, there is a property on Animator called Delegate. And the delegate is an object that's going to find out when the animator stops and when it starts up again. And I'm going to set that to be self. Now when I do that, I'm going to get a warning from the compiler here. Why is that? It says you are assigning self which is a drop-it view controller, to something that's supposed to be an ID UI dynamic animator delegate. In other words, you're supposed to be implementing this UI animator delegate. So we have to go up here and say that we implement this UI dynamic animator delegate. This is what we were talking about, protocols, saying that we promised to do something. Okay? Now, I'm not getting any more warnings, so there must not be any required methods in this. They must all be optional. And in fact, they are all optional, and there's only 2 of them. And the one I want is called dynamic animator did pause. You can see there's the 2 dynamic animator delegate methods, dynamic animator did pause and dynamic animator will resume. Okay, so that's telling you when it reaches a settled state and when something changed, a behavior or an item got added, and now it's going back active again. Okay, so in this case, we want to know the pause. Okay, when the pause happens, I'm going to look at that bottom row and see if it's complete. Actually, I'm going to look at all the rows and see if any of them are complete. Okay, and if they are, I'm going to blast them out of there. So I'm going to do that by calling a method called remove completed rows. And I have a little snippet for that to speed us up here. Okay, here it is right here. Okay, I didn't put it all in here. Actually, remove completed row, I call it, but really it should be rows. So how does this work? Well, you can take my word for it that this little snippet of code, and you can go look at it later, it basically just fills this mutable array, drops to remove, with all the drops that are in a completed row, even if there's multiple rows. Okay? It does this using this method hit test. I'm actually looking at all these things and seeing if there's a view there, and if it is, I'm okay. And if I get all the way across a row, I'm like, okay, I got a whole row, and I'll keep them all. So that's what drops to remove. This code right here is going to fill in drops to remove with all the things. Okay, so now we have an array of the drops that we want to remove. Now let's talk about what we're trying to learn here, which is animation. How do I remove them? And what I'm going to do that, it's kind of a 2-part deal here. The first thing I'm going to say, if I have any drops to remove, okay, then I am going to remove all of the drops that I'm going to be taking out of this view from the animator, from the dynamic animator, because I don't want the dynamic animator fighting me. Okay? I'm going to remove these things using UI view animation. I don't want it trying to pull them back or the gravity pulling on it. So I'm going to take them out, and I do that very simply by just saying self.dropItBehavior, remove item, drop. Okay, so I'm going through all the drops to remove, and I'm removing them from my dropIt behavior. Now they're not in any behavior, so they're not going to be affected by the animator. Okay? Now I'm going to, so that's that. Now I'm going to animate the blowing them up, okay? And I'm going to do that with animate removing drops, drops to remove. Okay, so this is a new method that we're going to write together here. Animate removing drops. It takes an array of drops to remove. Okay, and how are we going to do this? Well, I'm just going to do UI view animate with duration. Okay, so I want, there's a few versions of this. Some of them have delay, some don't have delay. So I want the one, which one do I want? I think I want the one with just completion. So that's this one. Okay, so I want this one right here. How long is it going to take? I'm going to take about a second to blow those things up. This probably wants to be a constant, and you want to tweak it to look good, right? If it blows up too slowly, it looks ridiculous. If it blows up too fast, people can't tell that it did it, so we'll do that. And then here's the animations, which is just a block. And here's the completion, which I'm not going to do anything on complete. Actually, I am going to do something on completion. Let's do something on completion just to show here. So finished. Okay. And that's it. So that's this entire animate with duration. All we need to do is fill in these two blocks. All right. So let's do this block first. This is the animations. This is the actual moving. So all I need to do here is move these things out of the way. So I'm going to have them kind of explode up and off the top of my view. So I'm going to move each one to a random location.